Yes.
And not whining and not making excuses.
Welcome back to the live stream on FreedomFest TV, part of the Ultimate Summit for Liberty. I'm your host, Heather Wagenhals, and with me is a presidential candidate, Larry Elder. Welcome
Heather,
to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So what keeps you coming back to FreedomFest?
It's a forum where people who understand that freedom is always under attack, and in my opinion, under attack in ways we've never seen before. The collusion between government and big tech to silence dissent, to silence criticism about the 2020 election, to silence concerns over lockdowns is absolutely Orwellian. I think if George Orwell were here, he'd go, really? So that's why I'm here.
Yeah, I mean, he would be like, wow, that crystal ball worked.
That's right.
He would be surprised at how well it
Talk
did.
about Big Brother. I mean, the collusion with the FBI, the DOJ, the two-tier justice system we have in this country where Donald Trump gets indicted for making a payment to Stormy Daniels that he attributed to a legal expense. Hillary pays for the DNC, DNC and Hillary pay for the Steele dossier. They call it a legal expense. She gets slapped on the wrist with a fine from the FEC, and Donald Trump is facing criminal charges by a state, by the DA in Manhattan. It's ridiculous.
So if you get, or I should say, when you get elected president.
I appreciate your optimism.
When you get elected president, we're going to get you on that ballot. We're going to make sure that happens.
Right.
When you get elected, what is going to be the first challenge that you tackle?
Well, thank you for that. In order for me to get elected, I'm going to have to get on that debate stage first. And that's next month in Milwaukee. I need 40,000 individual donations. And please go to my website, larryelder.com, to make that happen. The biggest thing I'm going to do when I become president is to reverse what Biden has done on the borders and to end this war on oil and gas, which has caused our gas prices to go up. But the things I'm going to be emphasizing and why I'm in this race is I'm the only one talking about the epidemic of fatherlessness in America. Right now, 40% of all kids in America enter the world without a father in the home married to the mother. That is up threefold from 1965 when Democrat Lyndon Johnson launched a so-called war on poverty. And what that's done is to incentivize women to marry the government and incentivize men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility. In 1965, when this war began, 25% of black kids entered the world without a father in the home married to the mother. Now it is 70%. 50% within the Hispanic community, 25% within the white community, up threefold from 1965. And the stats are clear. If you were raised without a father, you are 5 times more likely to be poor and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in jail. Now, our side does not talk about it for fear that we're going to be called racist, and women who are heroically raising children by themselves may resent it and may feel they're being attacked when they're not. The other side doesn't talk about it, Heather, because they created the problem. The other big issue is the absolute crisis of urban education. Let me just take one city, Baltimore. There are 13 public high schools in Baltimore, I kid you not, where 0% of the kids can do math at grade level. 0. Another half a dozen where only 1% can. And they're all located in the inner city of Baltimore. That's half of all the public schools in Baltimore in the inner city where either 0% or only 1% can do math at grade level. Take Chicago. 53 government schools, 0% of the kids can do math at grade level. Nationwide, there's something called the National Report Card. It really is a national assessment of educational policy, I think is the exact way of putting it. 85% of black 8th graders, 13-year-old kids, can neither read nor do math at grade level. Half can't even do basic reading, which means a substantial percentage of black kids in America are functionally illiterate. Why is this acceptable? Why is this okay? No, it's not. And then the third thing is this lie the Democrats have pushed for decades that America remains systemically racist. Of course, at one time it was, but not today, not in 2023. Yet that's what the Democrats are doing. And it pushes things like demand for reparations, critical race theory, race-based preferences, DEI, but it does something even worse. It's getting people killed. It's called the Ferguson effect or the George Floyd effect. That's a phenomenon of cops pulling back from doing their normal proactive policing for fear they're going to be called systemically racist. After a major shooting in Chicago, even the then mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, said the Chicago PD had, quote, gone fetal, close quote, meaning they weren't engaging in proactive policing. As a result, there were thousands of people who were dead or who had been injured by violent criminals who otherwise would not have suffered had the police been doing their normal proactive policing. It's also a lie to call the police systemically racist. The police, based on studies, are more hesitant, more reluctant to pull the trigger on a black suspect than a white suspect. And there are more unarmed white people killed every year than unarmed black people, but when an unarmed white person is killed, the media couldn't give a rip. When an unarmed black person gets killed, it's Katie bar the door, thus giving people the false impression that it happens far more often than it really does. There's a magazine on a website called policemag.com, and they asked a few years ago, self-described very liberal people, how many unarmed black men did the police kill in 2019? Half thought they killed 1,000, 8% thought they killed 10,000. They asked regular liberal people, how many unarmed black men did the police kill in 2019? And 39% thought they killed 1,000, 5% thought they killed 10,000. The answer, according to the Washington Post database, was 12. And
Wait,
just
12?
Just 12, yeah.
Okay.
And this is the gap between what people think is going on versus what is really going on, which is why so many people in the streets of May 2020 were out protesting because of the death of George Floyd. They assume that what happened with George Floyd happens often, when in fact it doesn't. Moreover, let's take George Floyd. The lead prosecutor was a black man, and in his opening statement, he took pains, Heather, to say the police in general were not on trial. The Minneapolis PD was not on trial. This individual named Derek Chauvin was on trial for what he did and didn't do to George Floyd. He never argued he was motivated by race, and Derek Chauvin was never charged with a hate crime. Yet you had 4 months of protests, 35 people killed, 2,000 officers injured, $2 billion worth of damage because of the assumption that there was a connection between George Floyd's race and what happened to them when there was no evidence of it. This is nuts. It's getting people killed, and I'm going to be talking about that on the campaign trail.
What other topics do you want to focus on, or issues that are important to you?
Well, obviously the economy, the inflation, which is eroding away our purchasing power. People are spending hundreds of dollars a month for the same goods and services that they paid for just a few years ago. We need to put back the Trump policies that were so successful on the border, giving us the best border we've had, I think, maybe in the history of this country. And we need to stop this war on oil and gas. And in my opinion, we need to stop this incessant push to force Americans to buy EVs. If EVs were such a good deal, why is it you have to essentially bribe people to buy them with tax subsidies and tax credits? And secondly, I don't buy the line that they're better for the planet on net than a gas-powered car. When you look at the fossil fuel that it takes to manufacture the EV, to transport the EV, the fact that the battery has these rare earth minerals like lithium, cobalt, nickel that come from China or are mined in China or come from places that are controlled by China around the world. It makes us even more dependent upon China, which makes it a foreign policy issue. And then you have the humanitarian crisis of child labor in places like the Republic of the Congo, digging stuff out with their bare hands that go into these batteries. So you put it all together, and I don't believe that EVs are better for the planet than gasoline-powered cars are, yet Joe Biden and people like Gavin Newsom in California are pressuring consumers to buy these things. And by the way, they're expensive. And so people who are less well off won't be able to pay for them without digging more into their pockets. So you put it all together, I do not understand this push for making American consumers buy EVs, and I will stop that when I become president.
Well, and no one ever talks about disposal because of batteries. You have special challenges.
They do. You put them in the ground, and they leak toxic materials. They threaten underground water supply, and the same things happen, by the way, with solar panels. They have a shelf life of maybe 5, 10, 15 years, and they have to be disposed of at some point. And disposing presents a real challenge to the very environment that the climate change alarmists purport to care about.
Right, that's a big challenge. Well, it's been incredible having a conversation with you today. I'm thrilled that you're continuing to be a part of FreedomFest and spread your message. Again, you have to get on the ballot.
I do.
So let's talk about that. What do you need?
I need 40,000 individual donations. The donation can be as small as $1, Heather, and I'm asking people to go to my website, larryelder.com, and get me up there in that debate stage. And once I get up there and people hear what I have to say, hear the issues I mentioned, all the obvious issues, the economy, the borders, getting us back to energy independence, but then talking about the epidemic of fatherlessness, the lie that America is systemically racist, and the critical need for school choice, I think people are going to go, you know what? That guy's got something to say. And even if I don't win, even if you want somebody else, help me get up there and put these issues front and center. Because once I do that, I will feel that I've given back to my party, and more importantly, that I've given back to my country.
Absolutely. And my thought is, even if I don't like your views, you're going to bring out a response to the person that I am favoring, and
Right.
I want to see how they handle these issues, and maybe you're the better man after all. Well, best of luck to you.
Thank you.
You so much for being a part of Freedom Fest TV.
My pleasure.
And stay tuned because we have more live interviews coming up. Who's next on tap, you guys? Robin's up? Okay, we need, who's swapping our mic? All right. Welcome back to Freedom Fest TV, part of the Ultimate Summit for Liberty. I'm your host, Heather Wagenhals, and I'm so excited to be having Robert Lumpson joining me. So, Robin, tell me what you like about Freedom Fest. This is your first one?
Yeah, that's my first appearance at the Freedom Fest. I was asked by a friend to appear because I own an American football franchise, and he asked, hey Robin, there's this opportunity, I want to introduce you to a couple of people. I heard that, I'm from Austria, from a Germanic country. There's the Austrian School of Economics.
Yes.
They presented here today, so it was super interesting for me to listen to some of the conversations.
And so let's talk about that, though. You're hearing an American version of Austrian economics because we teach it a certain way here. How was that for you?
Obviously, there are cultural differences, and what I do like about the U.S., and I've spent a fair amount of time in the U.S., I've studied in California at Stanford. What I do like is it's a lot more a direct culture in the U.S. We are more, we take circles,
Eloquent.
We walk around, we don't talk about stuff, and we're cynical and all kinds of things. So I do appreciate that about the U.S.
Right. Well, so you came here, you were educated here, and now you have a European football franchise.
Yes, indeed. So if you wish, it's something like the NFL Europe or the equivalent to that.
Okay.
And I did acquire last year the majority stake in a team called the Vienna Vikings.
Okay.
It's a league of 17 teams out of 9 countries. It's the fastest growing sport. Your US sport is the fastest growing sport in Europe, which is amazing. And it's like a family event. European sports generally are aggressive. Soccer, you can bring your family. It's just a sport. There's no event, and we changed that. And luckily, my team last year won the European Super Bowl.
Oh, congratulations! How
Thank
exciting!
You. That was awesome, and I wasn't aware that as owner, I would be handed over the trophy. That's a U.S. tradition in sports teams. We don't have that, but I love that U.S. tradition. So they handed it over to me. Millions of people are watching. It was a blast.
I bet it was so exciting for you.
Indeed.
And how neat. I got to tell you, in America, the number one sport that's growing right now is pickleball.
Fair enough. I mean,
I don't get it.
I don't get it as well.
I'm excited about the football piece. So how did you make the decision to say, you didn't just wake up one day and say, I want an American football team, did you?
No, I didn't, but I'm known in Europe and the Germanic countries as the US guy because I spend a lot of time in the US.
Okay.
I often am on TV, I explain US politics, US economics, they invite me. So I'm a known figure as an entrepreneur. And so when the Vienna Vikings, the team, decided to join this league, it was somewhat logical, hey, we need this guy with his US narrative. Let's ask him. He could afford it, might fancy it, and they asked me, and I did like it. And then I double-checked with the owner family, Spanish rule of the Los Angeles Chargers, because the daughter, Nicoletta, was in my MBA class at Stanford.
Okay.
Double-checked with her, I said, do you think it's a good idea? And she said, Robin, I think that's a perfect fit for you. And trust me, the NFL is looking at Europe, which is evidenced by the NFL playing games between 2 NFL teams in Europe frequently now. And so I think it was one of the best investments of my career so far.
Well, certainly you're getting a social ROI by saying, oh, well, I have a professional football team.
It sounds cool, doesn't it?
It does sound cool. So you've got the gravitas of that. So outside of that as an investment, because we have the Global Financial Summit here and we talk about financial freedom, and what other things do you like to invest in?
So these days, I do have a law firm, so I get a lot of deals offered which are not on market, so off-market deals. But I had a time where I focused heavily on the crypto, so in the crypto space. I started that in Stanford as well. So that was a time. Now I'm not too motivated in the crypto space as alternative investment anymore. But now I do fancy more, hardcore assets again. I like to buy companies, invest in companies, scale a team. And then once I was able to build a team the way it works, that I anticipate a team that should work, then one can think about selling again.
So what are some of the criteria that you use when you go to look at a company that you're interested in acquiring?
That's a good one. I could give you an academic concept of how you properly do and assess a company, but at the end of the day, I think it boils down to a feeling you have about the management. Are they honest with you when it is in your due diligence? And as a professional M&A guy, I can tell if something is not being disclosed. I actually do a lot of due diligence with market research and ask other people about the assets that I'm trying to acquire, not necessarily. So I double check every information I get. Usually, even if I work with advisors, I have a second advisor team that gives me a second opinion on the initial draft of a due diligence report I receive. So that's a little bit, I would say, the cocktail sauce that I use for my investments. but I think you could play it multiple ways.
Now, is it important to you to have an area of expertise in the particular company, or are you just open to it if you can understand it as it is explained to you simply, that motivates you to start the further due diligence process?
What I do is I try to make sure that I understand the economics of the industry I'm in.
Okay.
And after having done a lot of deals for other people, invested for a lot of European billionaires their money, and I sit on a couple of trusts in Europe for billionaires, and I give them my advisory strategy. And I don't give them my advice if I don't understand the industry. So that's key important for me. I don't need to be an expert, but I need to rely on experience from the past, say, wait a minute, this industry must work this or the other way. I get the mechanics of it, and then I can properly advise myself.
So, in European investing, what are good areas of interest to be investing in these days?
I think very much like in the US, there's, I would argue the Europeans are just in the modernization of trends just 2 years or a year behind the US. So everything you see happening in the US at some point of time, even if we Europeans don't want to hear that, takes place in Europe as well.
Okay.
May it be a phenomenon, whatever phenomena you want to envisage. But I think right now, I think it could be that there, like the franchise, like the NFL sport, and there are just opportunities out there. And from the outset, I'm a positive guy. I've created an environment around myself that I don't have too many negative distractions. I usually end conversations fairly soon when I'm kind of get mentally bored. So, could be some ADHS, whatever kind of issue around it. But I think there are opportunities all around it, and you're working with competent people. So I think the focus is find a team of, if I were American, find a team of Europeans who have somewhat a connection to the US, who could bridge the cultures, and then you use US metrics to go about business and apply them in Europe, or the other way around. I think that could be something that works, because you're then unique in the approach. And I do love the American entrepreneurship mentality, which is just ingrained in your culture,
right?
Which is very different in good old Europe. We have other advantages, but Americans, just when they get together, are entrepreneurial per se.
That's fascinating. Well, thank you for bringing your perspective. If folks want to learn more about what you do or engage you overseas in law, where do they find you?
It's just easy. Just Google my name, Robin Lumsden, and you would find me. Obviously there's more in the German, but if you add Robin Lumsden and Stanford, you will get access to myself.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being a part of Freedom Fest TV, and we'll be back with more live Freedom Fest TV right after this. Welcome back to FreedomFest TV, part of the Ultimate Summit for Liberty. I'm your host, Heather Wagenhals, and I have award-winning author sitting with me, Floyd Brown. Welcome to the program.
It's great to be with you, Heather, and I just love FreedomFest. I mean, I think this is a thinking person's conference, and that's what I love about it. You can come here and you can think all kinds of thoughts and you're still okay.
You're still okay? And even if people disagree with you, you're still okay.
That's right. Nobody gets canceled at FreedomFest.
Nobody gets canceled at FreedomFest. So let's talk about your last book. So you actually won an award with this,
Yeah.
and it has to do with a little bit of cancel culture.
Well, it was called Big Tech Tyrants. And what led me to write that book is really the story of my company, Western Journal. Because Western Journal started as my personal blog the year that Facebook opened to the wider public. That was 2008. And so my blog grew right along with Facebook, so that by 2016, I was in the Facebook news feed 11 billion times with content. That led to over 1 billion page views at Western Journal, and we were the 60th largest website in America in 2016. Well, much of my content was pro-conservative, and when Donald Trump got elected, my world changed because they had to really rewrite all of the algorithms to pull down free-thinking, conservative content, and so they took my traffic down a full 90%. And so I kind of lived through that. Western Journal, had its low, but we've rebuilt, and it's successful today. And what I like to do is every couple of years is kind of step back from the news and create some context, because, and especially the last few years, we've been in such a strange period, from COVID to the cancel culture to, all of these false narratives. Donald Trump is a Russian spy. I mean, it's been bizarre. I mean, I'm a big supporter of peace, and I get really upset about what I call the warfare state, which is really what Washington has become. It's perpetual war, but we never win anything.
Yes.
So we go into a place like
Afghanistan.
Afghanistan.
We win the opportunity to pay the bill.
Well, that's right, because when Eisenhower gave his speech warning about the military-industrial complex, it was just before John F. Kennedy took the oath of office, and it was at a time when we had won a lot of wars. But since then, since that speech that Eisenhower gave, America has not won a war. And the reason is because the strategy changed. It's now to maximize profits for the military-industrial complex, not win. So we go to a place like Iraq and we spend decades, or we go to Afghanistan, we spent 2 decades there,
right.
And every year they would tell us, hey, we're winning in Afghanistan. Guess what? We weren't. They were just lying to us, but boy, they were maximizing profits through that whole operation. And the same thing's going on in Ukraine right now. It's a profit maximization program, and I guess they're happy because it's not U.S. soldiers that are dying in this, it's Ukrainians, and literally hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians are dead, really for no purpose. It's a completely contrived war. So one of the things I talk about in my book a lot is the military-industrial complex, and the overgrown state that's come as a result.
Yeah, and so that the book is Counterpunch. This is the new book.
And it's about an unlikely alliance, because I think people are waking up to the fact that their government's being run by elites that really aren't in tune with the people. And I think COVID did a big part of that, because we lost our health freedom. We had a one-size-fits-all, suppressed therapeutics, and everybody had to do the same thing, which is line up for the shot, and people don't want to be told what to do.
Right.
At least I don't.
Well, I mean, the 2 rules, right? don't hurt people, and don't take their stuff. I love the Free the People booth. That's it. Just 2 rules: don't hurt people, don't take their stuff.
And that's what our government does. They
Right.
take our stuff, they empty our wallets, and they live really nicely because of it.
So, what examples do you use in your book?
So I have I have an example of a lot of different people that are doing really interesting things around the country. One of them is a guy named Basil Firminos.
Okay.
Basil got upset with mask mandates, and so he decided to text 50 of his friends, and this was during COVID, and he said, let's come together at a coffee shop and let's figure out how we can fight mask mandates. Now, Basil had never been involved in politics, and he runs a handyman business. So, but he had a lot of friends. He's a very social guy. And 250 people showed up. He texted 50, 250 people showed up at this coffee shop. And as a result of that, Basil's now the leader of a political movement in his area that's been involved in school board races. It's been involved in a lot of grassroots activities, all of them working to protect their freedom. And what I try to tell people through the book is that you underestimate the power that you have, especially to impact your world right around you.
Right.
We all have neighbors. We all have people we come into contact every day, and we need to work with those people to protect our communities. And so I try to encourage people just to get involved in some way, in some small way, to help fight for your freedoms. We have freedoms that are guaranteed under our Constitution. We have the First Amendment, and those freedoms only work if we actually exercise them. So what I'm telling people is speak out, have courage, don't fear, and I think I've got a lot of people listening. So I'm feeling pretty good about things.
Yeah, I'm blown away by the numbers that you've been able to pull. And congratulations on your book award on the last one. And let's hope you get this one up there and do some really good numbers with this.
Because it's all about protecting our freedom and to leave to the next generation the amazing country that benefited us so much.
Agreed. That's so well said, Floyd. Thank you so much for being a part of this show. Floyd Brown, his book, Counterpunch. Make sure you get it. It's already on bookshelves. I'm Heather Wagenhals, and we'll be back with more Freedom Fest TV right after this. Welcome back to FreedomFest TV, part of the Ultimate Summit for Liberty. I'm your host, Heather Wagenhals, and joining me is Kent Heckenlively. See, he's a multiple book author, and we're going to have some awesome conversations. So let's talk presidential takedown.
This is
What?
the book. This is the book everybody should be interested in. This is behind the scenes of the COVID-19 task force.
Okay.
So we all sat on our couches and we watched those task force meetings. Well, this is like going behind the camera, behind the scenes. Dr. Paul Alexander was brought in essentially May of 2020 to be the senior pandemic advisor because Trump didn't necessarily trust what the COVID-19 task force was saying it. So Dr. Paul Alexander was one of the world's leading evidence-based medicine experts. And so he was brought in to sort of give Trump an independent view of what the COVID-19 task force was telling him.
Okay. So how did that differ from the information that we were hearing?
So on the inside, what Dr. Paul Alexander, who was actually the evidence-based medicine expert for the World Health Organization previously before that, was saying, where's the evidence on masking? Where's the evidence that children shouldn't be attending school because this virus was very different from other viruses. Like flu viruses can be very serious for children. This virus was not serious for children because it entered through the ACE2 receptor. But the ACE2 receptor is not active in children. So think of it like a flower that's not opened. Well, the bee can't land on it and get the pollen. So the virus basically couldn't land on the receptor and get into the children's cells. So when children were getting COVID, they were getting extremely mild cases. So the evidence in about March, April was overwhelming that children should be in school. And what Paul Alexander argues in the book is that Fauci and the others did not want kids to go back to school in September of 2020 because then the parents would have been happy, and when people are happy, they vote for the incumbent. Paul Alexander also has a number of other charges which are really disturbing. So as a senior pandemic advisor, he was able to get basically the key to the executive lunchroom. And so he would go in there at lunch. And so he's not an American citizen. I don't believe he's an American, not born in America. He was born in Trinidad. He's Middle Eastern, North African, speaks with a Caribbean accent. And so he'd be in the executive lunchroom with all these department heads, and they would not believe that he was actually conservative. And so they would say, look, brother, you need to know this Trump guy, our job every day is to make him look like an idiot on the evening news. Now that's just terrifying because these are our bureaucrats. This was the greatest public health crisis of the past century, and our public officials, our department heads, were playing politics. And so it's about that. It's about how they eventually drove Paul Alexander out by taking an email, which was 4 or 5 pages long, very detailed, publishing it in the Washington Post. But what they didn't do was they didn't publish the whole email exchange. They published 4 words: we want them infected, meaning that we wanted the children to get infected because then they'd be protected against it, and that protection would start to spread throughout the entire population.
Right. Okay. Well, that's really fascinating. So folks can get a look at that. But here now we're switching gears.
Switching gears.
So we're talking about COVID, and now we're talking about journalism.
Yeah. And so I've written. This was CNN, how sex, lies, and spies undid the world's worst news network. So I've written 4 books with Project Veritas whistleblowers. So this one, Kerry Porch, he went into CNN in approximately June of 2017. He went in as a Bernie Sanders supporter, okay? And his job, he was under contract to CNN to make sure the satellite trucks were ready. So he would be the guy who, there's a breaking news story, jumps in the truck with another engineer, they race out to the scene, he gets all the technology set up, the anchors or the newsmen come and do their reports, then when that's done, gathers everything up, takes it back to CNN headquarters in Washington, D.C. So the first job he had was the Charlottesville riots. So remember, this is a guy who was a Bernie Sanders supporter. He thought Trump was an idiot. And so what happens is he goes there, he witnesses some of the violence, and he hears Trump's words as Trump is saying them, and he's like, well, okay, I didn't vote for Trump, but this is kind of what any American president should say. And then he watched as they changed those words, how they selectively edited it. And he was like, this is wrong. And he kept seeing example after example of that. Part of the story is also kind of funny, which was his father is conservative, and his father would come to town, and he'd want to go out to the Trump hotel and the Trump bar. And so Kerry, who's a big liberal, is like, okay, Dad, you're in town, I'll go to the Trump bar. And so he's at the Trump bar, and he's getting into conversations with people, and they'll say like, oh, where do you work? And he's like, CNN. And he's expecting them to go ballistic. But conservatives are just curious people. That's always been my experience. And so they go, oh, what's that like? And he was sort of stunned that these people would have these conversations with him, and he didn't expect it. And so he kept seeing example after example of how CNN was twisting the words of the president. He was also seeing a lot of longtime CNN employees who were disgusted by how the news media had changed. They used to send out lots of investigative teams, and they were doing opinion shows. The whole Jeffrey Zucker dictating news coverage every day at the 9 a.m. meeting. And so all of these things led to him contacting James O'Keefe. Actually, CNN sent him to cover CPAC, and so he used that as the cover to talk to James O'Keefe. He recorded undercover at several months for Project Veritas, and that was released in a video that was seen by millions of people.
Wow. So do you have anything in the works?
Yeah, so
Can you talk about it?
I figure I haven't gotten into enough trouble yet, America. So my next book, my publisher had set me up with Alex Jones, and so we're doing the book, The Great Awakening. So we have finished it. After FreedomFest, I'm going to Austin, and Alex and I will hopefully put the finishing touches out on it, and that'll be out late August, early September.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being a part of today's episode. So if folks want to find your books, where do they go?
They're all on Amazon. My website is kenheckenlivelybooks.com. You can find me on Twitter, Ken Heckenlively. I don't use any phony names. Just look, Ken Heckenlively, you'll find me.
Excellent. Well, thank you for being a part of the show. I'm Heather Wagenhals, and we'll be back with more Freedom Fest TV Live right after this. Welcome back to FreedomFest TV, part of the Ultimate Summit for Liberty. I'm your host, Heather Wagenhals, and I am visiting with longtime friend, author, and incredible activist, Carla Gericke.
Oh my God, so great to see you. It's been too long.
I know, I miss you guys. I need to make it out. I miss PorcFest.
And you missed a good one. It was our 20th anniversary. Can you believe it? And we had it was insane. I mean, we had RFK, Vivek Ramaswamy came out. We had Larry Elder from California. And then we had hundreds of just little hubs, little things, little classes, little teaching, everything from, build your own rocket for the kids to like build your own AR for the ladies.
Nice. That's my class.
Yeah.
That's my class. So let's talk about, first off, let's talk about your work with the Free State Project.
So for folks who don't know, I know you of course know, but just for folks back home, the Free State Project is a movement to try and concentrate libertarians and liberty lovers in the great state of New Hampshire. It's of course the live free or die state, which yes, is why we picked it. And so we've been around, as I said, for about 20 years, and we're just going from strength to strength. And I feel like we're kind of the best kept little secret at this stage. We're still ranked #1 in overall freedom. We have no sales tax, no personal income tax. We just passed a law to reduce the dividends and interest tax, so we're truly tax-free from a wealth perspective. And then we've just had people elected, we're starting businesses, we're buying up properties. It's just a really exciting time. It kind of feels like, for me, I mean, it feels like the fruition of a lot of long, sloggy work.
Right.
But it really does feel like we've gone from proof of concept to, we're doing this.
Absolutely, because I remember you guys were petitioning folks to move.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, and that was 10 years ago?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, it was a while back.
So in 2016, what we call triggered the move, which was, as you say, at one stage, we forget because people are so spoiled with technology now, right? Like with all the tech stuff. So, this is in the olden days where we used smoke signals. No, I mean, it was literally like you had to get people to sign this pledge, right? Mm-hmm. And the pledge was that, if we could get 20,000 people to say, hey, if you're crazy enough and I'm crazy enough and there are 20,000 of us who are crazy enough, let's move to this one place and let's try and build a libertarian state, something that is based on property rights, individual liberty, and personal responsibility, because those two things kind of have to go together, right?
Yeah, it's very Gulch-Gulchish.
Yes, it is. It really is. It's amazing, and we're at the stage. We have so many little kids, families starting. There's a lot of school freedom. We have a Breedom for Freedom program, which is just basically so many people are moving and having kids that, we have all these free-range children being born free. I mean, it really feels, it feels special. It feels historic, to be honest.
Well, and what a great foundation for creativity, which parlays me into this. I love this. The Ecstatic Pessimist. So, let's talk about your book.
Yes. So it is it's sort of a collection. So Nick Gillespie of Reason Magazine said it is a phenomenal piece of work, but it is kind of an odd mix in the sense that it's short stories, speeches, some longer pieces, essays, personal essays. It's partly fiction and partly nonfiction, and people can read it to figure out which is which.
Now I'm going to have to tear through that. I'm like, I know that person.
And it actually starts with, most of the stories are award-winning short stories. I actually do have a master's in fine arts from City College. So I was a lawyer for a long time and then realized, I think I want to do some other things with my life than move stacks of paper around for the government. And so, I'm working on some new books and stuff, and people can certainly, get this on Amazon, so easy
Excellent.
to find. But also I have a blog, carlagericke.com, and I try and post things every day, do a lot of health, lifestyle sort of things, because I don't know if you agree, but I feel like we love talking about politics and all of that, but really I think libertarianism or freedom at its heart is self-empowerment. Because when you start to focus on your internal world and sort of like keeping your unit healthy, balanced, like all of those things, then first of all, you're focused enough on yourself that you don't have time to go worry about what everyone else is doing wrong, right? And also you can just, then you're in a good place if you're going to help your neighbors or tell someone else, hey, try and do it this way. So it starts with a short story that is actually about an alcoholic, and it ends with my own personal essay about how I quit drinking. So I quit alcohol about 6 years ago now, and it was a really good lifestyle change for me. Not for everyone, but I'm kind of a teetotaler now, and I like to spread the word. So
it's very exciting, and you're right. Like here at Freedom Fest, we have the opportunity to discuss politics, and legislation is important. But the whole point of what we're doing is to minimize government, which means less laws, not like sitting around making more laws, because we want to have a flourishing life.
Right.
And it's about better health, better wellness. What can I learn? What can I do? How can I move today? How can I think better? How can I be inspired? What can I create, either in the kitchen, on the walls, some art, whatever it is? What can I do that inspires me today?
Yeah, and I think I'm so glad you said and cook, because I'm a happy chef, and part of, I think, health is nutrition, and so how we're feeding ourselves, are we eating junk, are we eating whole foods, all of that kind of stuff. But food is also such a creative process, and I actually think food is kind of the international story of freedom in some ways. The spice trail, we started trading, we're people who believe in markets and all of that. And it's actually the story of freedom from a peace perspective. So we study, wars and the legislation and all of that. But there's this other story that's happening. I think it's Durant said, the story of civilization is the story of the people on the banks of the river. So we learn all these things about, history, war, all of that. But really, it's the people making love, getting families, creating things, cooking food, and all of that. Because in the end, it's the human condition. And so it starts inside each of us, and so creativity, food, all the great stuff. I think we should all be focusing more on that.
Absolutely, because it's so romantic. It's very sensual. I love the whole act of preparation. It's not just about, oh, I'm going to eat something great. It's, I lovingly prepared this. I diced the vegetables. I sauteed the pan. I selected the seasonings. I delicately, sprinkled them. And the whole thing is just a very unique, romantic, sensual experience.
Yeah.
And then the satisfaction, I find too, that when I'm a part of that creative process of the cooking, I savor my food and actually eat less
yes,
when I
that's
make it
true
myself.
too. Yeah.
Because there's more satisfaction out of every morsel.
Yeah, and of course, if you're anything like me, you're eating a little bit while you're cooking it too.
Well, I know.
So I've had a little pre-meal, right?
Well, yeah, it's quality control, sister.
Yes, thank you.
It's nothing but quality. It has to be done.
Yeah, and I always say cooking is a little bit like, it's a little daily science project, right? And for those people who are very mindset, goal-oriented people, one of the things I actually really do love, and I'm trying to encourage more people to cook at home, make whole foods, because I think it's part of the way we break this absolutely incredibly negative cycle. The world is incredibly unhealthy, and we've got to figure out how to bring it back into balance. And I think nutrition, eating right and starting there, cutting out the processed foods, those kinds of things, is a way to start. So if we can teach people who apparently no longer know how to cook,
right.
That you can do it. It's not hard. I only learned to cook, once I immigrated to America. I was, a lawyer in Silicon Valley before I was like, oh, how do you actually make good food that mom didn't make or someone didn't, get at a fancy restaurant. And now I find it's very flow in the true sense of the word, because it's this contained daily project where you get to work with dangerous stuff. You got knives and fire and, it's actually cooking is actually...
It's an adventure.
Yeah, and then you get to actually get the fruits of your labor. You've done this whole thing, you get to share it and lift other people, you know, if you're having a dinner party or feeding your family, your husband, all of that. And then you, get to take pleasure out of your own work, which is something I think we should focus on more as well.
Right. And, you know, all the politics in the world, we can't control what goes on there. So it all really starts with us.
Yeah.
And we got to take care of us.
And I think it's also, I call it like a locus of focus or something. I think so many people, it's the opposite of appeal to authority. So many people are like, if only like that person implements the policy, does this thing, right? So your focus is outside of yourself. But when you flip that and you start to go, well, what do I need, right? Then you can actually remarkably improve your own life within your own control. That gives you a sense of self-ownership in the true sense of that word, right? Because when you strip everything away, that's what we're talking about. Who owns you? And if you own yourself, do you take care of your property, right? I mean, that sounds maybe bizarre, but that's the way I look at it.
It's right on point.
Yeah.
It's right on point. Because everything stems from us. You know, in Ayn Rand and her virtues of selfishness, it's true. It's not an inherently negative word. We add that connotation to it, but we have to be the first ones to take care of ourselves, to love ourselves, to provide for ourselves before we can ever have the expectation of someone else doing that. And only for that reason of self-respect, because if I don't respect me, why would this person respect me? That's why we get toxic relationships. That's why we bring crappy people into our lives, because we're being crappy to ourselves.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. You know, people talk about selfishness and they love to say libertarians or liberty or freedom people are so selfish. And I'm like, everyone should be selfish. So that's what we should be teaching people. Because once you can organize yourself, then you get to lift other people, right?
Yes.
So it's actually a knock-on effect. It's a kernel that starts that then, you know, feeds from there. And we should be looking at the self words more carefully. You know, self-care is one, you know, we hear a lot about. I only learned about that. Yeah, I only learned about that one in my 50s. So I was okay, at least I'm on board now. But, you know, because you want to take on too much. And I actually had to relearn that actually self-care is where it starts in order to add it on. But more interesting ones are things like self-esteem, self-empowerment, so somewhere along the line we stopped using those words, right? And it's kind of because the system, the man, the guys we're fighting, they don't want people to think about things with this paradigm. They
like
actually
self
want
is
to
a four-letter word.
Yeah.
Don't talk about yourself. Yeah. This has been so fun. I'm so glad we got to catch up.
Me too. It's a pleasure. I'm having a wonderful time at FreedomFest. This is such a great festival. And it really runs the gamut of our very short but very expansive little chat, right?
Yes.
We've got health, wellness, wealth, all the politics,
creativity. We've got
the
music
books,
that
the
you can
music,
hear, the books, the art, the film.
Yeah.
It's a one-stop shop.
It sure is.
For flourishing, for human flourishing. Well, thank you so much. So what website, if people want to learn more about the Free State Project,
okay,
give us that.
Free State Project, FSP.org. So that's really easy. We have a newsletter. That's the best way for people to just drop in and, you know, we can start to communicate, tell them more about this incredible thing we're doing in New Hampshire. And then if people want to find me other than on Twitter, where I'm now banned, they can find me by my name, Carla Garrick, everywhere. Except
and this
Twitter.
is her book, The Ecstatic Pessimist. Carla, thank you so much for being a part of today's show. I'm Heather Wagenhals, and we'll be back with more Freedom Fest TV right after this. welcome to FreedomFest TV, part of the Ultimate Summit for Liberty. I'm your host, Heather Wagenhals, and I have the man walking the high wire himself, Del Bigtree.
Hi.
Welcome to FreedomFest TV.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's so wonderful to have you on. You exemplify Freedom Fest. Tell us why you enjoy Freedom Fest so much.
Well, I think that we're all recognizing, especially here in the United States of America, which is supposed to be this beacon of light and hope around the concept of freedom, showing the world what it means to be free. And we've just come through a COVID pandemic where our freedom was robbed from us. We watched our First Amendment rights to free speech taken away. My show was censored. The High Wire was pulled off of Facebook, pulled off of YouTube. And then just this week, now we're seeing courts push back and blocking Biden, saying you're not allowed to use social media platforms to take away people's right to speech. So in this unprecedented time, we were forced to wear masks. That's proven to be unconstitutional. Our jobs were taken away if we didn't vaccinate. Unconstitutional. I don't remember a time ever where a sitting president has lost more court cases saying what you tried to do to the population or what you did do was ruled unconstitutional. What it all revolve around? The fact that we now have a government in the United States of America that's supposed to be representing freedom to the world that is being ruled to be breaking the Constitution and trying to rob us of our freedom. So that's why this is so important. And I think also when we think about our government, really it's stuck in this like two-party situation where it's Democrats and Republicans, and they all seem to be in on this game. And so whether we call it a third party or say that it's liberty or whatever it is, what I think is beautiful about Freedom Fest is it's really just about free, critical thinking human beings. You don't hear a lot of conversations about, what party are you in? It's what are your thoughts?
Right.
What do you think is going
wants
on?
Your ideas.
That's it. It's ideas. And so that's what Freedom Fest is. It's this sharing of ideas and great thought leaders from all over the world stepping onto the stages here to make us think, to make us, to sort of satisfy what I think is a growing skepticism that should be happening. We should be more skeptical. We have definitely faxed in our votes. We have allowed our government to get out of our control, and we've forgotten that it's really freedom is in the hands of we, the people.
Right, of the people, by the people, for the people.
Exactly right.
And we need to refocus that. Your show does a great job of highlighting what we need to be focusing on. So here, who have you had some really great conversations with so far?
Well, I just finished doing a live show right here in the middle of this hall of all these presenters. I had the opportunity to sit with Mike Rowe today.
Awesome.
He was one of the guests I had. I got with him this morning. We played it on our show, but here, again, like what a beautiful individual who is talking about, we've been watching him, go out and, have these dirty jobs with people, but how we really put down the working class of this country, the class of people that our nation was built on. Suddenly it became about, oh, you're not truly, representing the American dream. The American dream requires a college education and, and now we have sold this bill of goods to students. There are billions of dollars in debt now in America. The idea is somehow we're going to forgive that loan. And I think that what I was talking to him about, which is a super interesting conversation, is it really right that the workers that went out and are, plumbing our homes and building our homes and fixing our cars, that they did that to keep this country running? They should pay for the students that went into debt in the university. It should come from them. It just doesn't. Yeah, there's just a lot that we've got to work out here, and I think really, when you think of freedom, it's really focused on personal responsibility, right? What is my responsibility to my life, the choices I made? Is it really somebody else's fault that I'm in debt on the education that I got? I think that really when it comes down to is let's get the government out of fixing it. Let's get the government out of bailing every different institution, every bank that somehow makes mistakes. How about own your mistake? How about live with your mistake? How about overcome your mistake?
It makes your whooping.
That's it.
Learn
Take your whooping.
From it.
That's it.
And then move on.
So yeah, great conversations. And that was an amazing one.
Yes, and so we've got so many more coming up. We've got 2 more days. Who are you
Yeah.
looking forward to talking to?
You know, I heard Steve Forbes is floating around here, or could be.
I
and,
had
you
him
know,
earlier.
I heard Robert Kennedy Jr. He's always cool to see him, and just some really outrageous figures. My attorneys here, Aaron Siri, we've been winning a lot of lawsuits, so we're going to be on main stage tomorrow morning. I'm on main stage speaking
Excellent.
about really how our empathy has been used as a weapon against us, our compassion. And then later on in the afternoon, Aaron and I are going to sit down because we've been funding lawsuits that has put medical experts, heads of our vaccine departments on the stand, and we're going to show the world what they're saying when they're under oath. It doesn't match up with what we've been told by CNN and MSNBC and all these
Curious.
agencies that are lying to us. So,
Yes,
yeah.
it's curious how that happens. Well, I'm going to
Yeah.
let you get back to
All right.
work. Thank you so much for being a part of this
Hey,
show.
thank you for doing this incredible work for this brilliant event. And
It's all about furthering the conversation.
that's it. That's what it's all about. We
Excellent.
should all keep talking.
Well, this is Del Bigtree. I'm Heather Wagenhouse, and we'll be back with more Freedom Fest TV right after this. Welcome to Freedom Fest TV, part of the Ultimate Summit for Liberty. I'm your host, Heather Wagenhals, and with me we have Way of the Renaissance Man, Jim Woods, joining us.
Hey.
Welcome to Freedom Fest TV, Jim.
Thank you, Heather. It's always a pleasure.
Excellent. Well, I'm thrilled about Freedom Fest this year. Now, this isn't your first Freedom Fest. Tell us why you keep coming back.
The main reason, other than to mingle with friends I don't get to see but once a year usually because they're from all over the world, I think the thing I like best about it is I like the diversity of opinion. Because if the only way to learn something and the only way to be confident in your own arguments is to hear the best arguments on the other side of your position. And maybe if you can talk enough, you'll come to some kind of a rational agreement and the world becomes better that way.
Absolutely. And if you don't, you can disagree agreeably and at least come away with something to think about. If it doesn't sway your opinion, at least you have a new consideration that you may not have made before.
It's very difficult in the siloed world that we live in. Information siloing is a big problem. So if you only read what you want to read and what really resonates with you, you're never going to learn about anybody else's opinion. And if you don't learn about other opinions, now you can totally disagree with these opinions, but you need to know what they are if you want to actually be an effective change agent for your own opinion. So that's why I like it.
Yay! Well, I mean, Freedom Fest is just, it's my 10th year now, and you've been coming for several now.
Yeah, I think it's about my fifth, sixth year now. So I'm behind you, but hopefully I'll never catch up. We'll both be doing it.
There you go. But at least you can keep trying. We'll
That's
have
right.
you keep trying. So you're part of the Global Financial Summit here at Freedom Fest.
Yes.
You're an investment writer and a stock picker and a market analyst. So tell people about the talks that you're going to be giving this year.
Sure. So my talks are Friday and Saturday. The first one I'm going to be talking about a service that I have called Bullseye Stock Trader. So the premise of it is, how do you hit the bullseye with your stock and options trader? How do you know what stocks out there are the ones to buy, and how do you actually buy them at the right time? So I go through what I call my big 5 characteristics for winning stocks. So I look at earnings growth, I look at price performance, I look at the technical patterns, I look at something I call news Q, which is kind of like an IQ, but for the news and information. So that's another reason to be open to all the kinds of information, is because you pick up a lot of things. Like I picked up a tip on on a cosmetics company from one of my subscribers' daughters, because she's 17 and 17-year-old girls know a lot about fashion and cosmetics, much more so than 50-something Ben. So,
I wear the ELF one. I know what he's talking about, by the way. It's the ELF company.
ELF company, that's right, yeah. ELF is a ticker symbol. So there's your free tip for today. And then the other talk I'm giving is more of a macro talk. It's called Markets to be Commanded Must be Obeyed.
Sounds philosophical.
It's a spin on Sir Francis Bacon's proclamation, nature to be commanded must be obeyed. So with markets, you have to, if you want to make winning investments, you have to obey the market's rules. And by obeying market's rules, I mean know what's going on.
Okay.
But how do you know what's going on? That's what I'm going to talk to you about and show you how to do it, because there's a lot of noise out there, but there's only a few things that really matter.
Excellent.
So
That's awesome. So folks can take and not just get your winning picks, but understand the methodology behind them and how.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's one thing for someone to say, buy this, sell that, and it could be good, it could not be good. But if you're told, buy this because of this reason or that reason, and here's why I like it, here's why I don't like something, that goes a much longer way to explaining why you're doing something. Because people, even if somebody tells you, do X, Y, Z, you're going to rebel against it. If somebody tells you, here's why I'm doing X, Y, and Z, then you're going to, and then they want to know more. So it's like anything in life. If you show someone why you're doing something, then that's going to go over better than just telling them to do it. You know, any parent knows, you tell your kid, don't do this, he's going to want to do it, right? Because I used
Even more so.
Because I was a kid once, and if my parents said that to me, I'd immediately not do it.
I was that rebel too.
Exactly. But we learn. If they would maybe the art of persuasion. I know you write in your writing. You write about the art of persuasion, and it's something that I follow actually quite closely, because persuasion is a skill.
Indeed.
You know, you have to have the skills to persuade, and it's more about how you're saying it than what you're saying. So I think you're an expert at this, so you can confirm if I'm following your rules right.
Here's a simple example. You look at your dog and you go, "You're such a naughty doggy. You just doo-dooed on the floor again." What is he going? He's like, "Whoa, waggy tail," right? So it's about how it's the delivery.
That's right. And my sources tell me you have quite a beautiful French bulldog too. So
He
I
is
heard.
adorable, and I am the one that ruins him by talking
That's
baby
right,
talk
exactly.
when he makes mistakes. So I am guilty of
Yeah,
that.
that's all right. That's what you're supposed to spoil your dog.
There you go. So you mentioned 2 of your talks, but you have actually 3 things you're up to this year at Freedom Fest.
Yes, that's true.
So I noticed in a photograph that you had a guitar slung on your back.
Yes, we are doing something unique this year. First time we tried it, Freedom Fest. There's a lot of musicians here the people that play music.
Funny thing in Memphis.
Yeah, speakers, music. Yeah, Memphis, of course, the locals are tremendous. But we have a Freedom Fest, like an in-house Freedom Fest band, and we're going to open up a jam session. It's actually tonight, and I'll be playing a few original compositions with the band, and we're going to do a little bit of Bob Dylan cover or 2, maybe a Guns N' Roses cover. So it should be fun.
That's so exciting. Well, we'll look forward to having that and for your upcoming talks.
Thank you.
If folks want to learn more about what you do, how do they find you?
Easiest way to find me is jimwoodsinvesting.com. That's the hub for everything. And then if you're a podcast-oriented person, I have a podcast called wayoftherenaissanceman.com. Check that out, and you have fun with it.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being a
Thank
part
you,
of
Heather.
this episode. Jim Woods here, and I'm Heather Wagenhals for Freedom Fest TV. We'll be right back with more coming up after this. Cameras were supposed to be
That's
over the
okay.
shoulders up, but
Hey, thanks.
That was great.
Oh, cool.
it's okay. Welcome back to FreedomFest TV, part of the Ultimate Summit for Liberty. I'm your host, Heather Wagenhals, and joining me now, we have Reason Magazine Editor-at-Large, Nick Gillespie. Nick, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So, what makes FreedomFest so special for you?
Oh, I think, it's the scale of it more than anything. There's just a lot of people here, and also it covers like a spectrum that you don't see at other, I think, libertarian events. There's libertarians, there's conservatives, there's also, certain types of progressives and whatnot. So for me, it's the sheer size, but then it's also the range of the spectrum that's represented here. And the focus on things like, individual freedom and liberty, which, there's a lot of disagreement here, which I also kind of like, but, the focus is clear.
I'm fond of the differing opinions because I think that spirited debate and engagement allows us to come up with even more possibilities that we may not have considered had we not had someone engage us.
It's also, it's interesting here, you see it, and not that many other places where you'll have people who really disagree on the same panel. I'm old enough and I have an academic background where you would go to conferences to hear disagreements as opposed to everybody on a panel agreeing and kind of like doing amen to whatever the first, the next person said. I not only find that boring as a spectator, but it, like you were saying, you don't know if your arguments are any good, you don't know what the limits of your worldview are if you're not testing it through kind of argument and debate. And it can be done civilly. It's not like you got to be a jerk about it.
I don't think that those words should have negative connotations.
Yeah.
Like we build arguments, and it's either valid, rational, or it's not.
I'm a big fan, and I've been at Reason in October. I've been there for 30 years. Reason was founded in 1968, so I've been there for a long chunk of it, and I started there in the 90s, and I was very big on the explosion of media options and information and news sources that came with the internet and the World Wide Web, and I still am, but it bothers me that a lot of people just watch, they watch Fox or they watch CNN or MSNBC or they read this website or that website, and it's really the mix. Like, we have been set free where we can finally get all different points of view about all different topics, and that's like so great. And I feel like on some level we're kind of squandering that. So Freedom Fest is good because it kind of forces you to encounter people who you might disagree with.
Right, and I feel like I want to know what the people that I'm not like are saying.
For sure.
Because that's power.
Yeah.
Because people want to silence everybody, and I'm like, then you got more problems, because now you don't know what the people think.
Yeah. No, I agree.
And I'm okay for the differing opinions.
I'm worried a lot that I think on the conservative and liberal or conservative and progressive, I don't see this as much in the libertarian thing, but like we are going through a period where people want to silence debate and discussion, or if not silence it, they want to de-emphasize it. And that's problematic. I mean, people are, on the one hand, they're saying, oh, we're too polarized, but then we can't be in the same room together to kind of work through our differences. And I actually think in a lot of ways, if we we talk to cross each other more, we would actually recognize we mostly agree on a lot of stuff. There's a political scientist named Morris Fiorina, who I'm very fond of his work, and he's been doing this since about 2000, that there are like super majorities of Americans who believe in things like, before Roe versus Wade, they believe, that, women should make be the primary deciders of abortion rights or reproductive rights, and that, abortion in the first trimester, there was like 2/3 of Americans or more believe that immigration is generally good for the country, that people should be allowed to own weapons, that marijuana should be legal, that same-sex marriage should be okay, and there's like 60 to 80% majorities in all of these areas, and it would be good to find that out and kind of say, okay, we agree on these things, which is good. Here are the things we disagree about. Let's actually focus on them instead of doing a lot of, culture war stuff that's on issues that are not really that important.
So how do we bridge that gap?
Yeah. I mean, I think by talking more with people we disagree with, reaching out to them, kind of getting outside of our intellectual or ideological bubbles and things like that. And it's weird. Again, I love being online, and I think the internet and the World Wide Web and social media. These have all I'm old enough to remember when there were 3 channels, and cars only had AM radios and things like that.
I was the remote control.
Yeah.
Heather, go change the channel.
Yeah. No, and it's so I know what it's like when you have limited information sources. I never want to go back to that, but by the same token, everything is so screen focused now. Like, getting out into the real world is a starting point. Like you say, how do you get past that? And it's like going to a school board meeting, going to, for a long time I lived in a small town in Ohio, and going to the car show or whatever they would do uptown, and actually mingling with people, on a day-to-day basis. I mean, we don't even go into work anymore. So it's easy to demonize or to, just stop thinking about people who disagree with you when you're living in kind of self-contained bubbles. So.
Do you remember 20 years ago the Popcorn Report and Faith Popcorn writing about that?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I heard it.
Yeah.
We're
and
here. We drive into our garage, and then the door goes down, and
that was cocooning, and then burrowing was the next thing. And we're in a burrowing phase where it's not only we're in a cocoon that's kind of comfortable, and we're waiting for the next part of our lives to begin, but then we're burrowing, where we're getting further and further away from everyday contact with people.
I know, and that's frightening because communication stalls.
Yeah.
Computer-mediated conversation is the worst thing that happened to us.
It's, in a way, I mean, and again, I'm a unabashed supporter of all of that, but you realize, and I have kids, who are, one's a millennial, one's a Gen Zer, and when I'll say to them, call and find out if the restaurant's open, and they'll be like, no, they don't want to call. They want, they'll go online and read the hours, but the hours might be wrong, and it's let's
They'll
start.
chop off their arm before they'll use it to dial their phone.
And it's also just calling somebody isn't even going there, but it's just having more contact with reality, a different type of reality than what we get on screen. So I think that's a big first start.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time today. If folks want to find more about what you're thinking and where you can be found.
The best thing is to always go to reason.com. That's the website for Reason Magazine. We have a video platform, podcasts, as well as all of our print material going back to 1968 is available there. I'm online too much at Twitter, at Nick Gillespie, all one word, all lowercase. I like hanging out there. And this is also, we're in a moment now where everybody hates social media, but I actually like social media a lot, and I find Twitter very funny. I find Instagram refreshing. I'm a little bit worn out by all of the, the new social media sites that are coming along. But what I like about them is a couple of years ago, we were talking about how Facebook was a monopoly and had to be broken up. Twitter was a monopoly and had to be broken up. And it's Facebook is dead in the water. People are leaving it. New platforms are forming all the time. So we actually are in a golden age of, kind of a proliferation of options. So, and one of those should be just getting out and actually, shopping for groceries rather than having them delivered to you.
That's me. Instacart's the new app.
I got it. I understand.
Thank you again for being a part of this show. Reason.com. If you want to find more about Nick Gillespie, or hit him up on his shows. I'm Heather Wagenhals, and we'll be back with more Freedom Fest TV right after this. Welcome to FreedomFest TV, part of the Ultimate Summit for Liberty. I'm your host, Heather Wagenhals, and I am sitting here with one of my main stage panelists, actually, Daniel Bunn of the Tax Foundation.
Thank you, Heather. It's great to be here with you.
I'm so excited. So first off, FreedomFest. What brings you to FreedomFest?
So this is actually my first time at FreedomFest. And one of the reasons that I wanted to come here is because right now, around the country, there's a little bit of a tax revolution going on, and be able to share some of the stories that we're seeing from different states and the way they're looking at reforming their tax codes. And honestly, it's not just a state conversation these days. We have an expiring tax code at the federal level that people need to be aware of.
And this is a great place because you've got a lot of rabble-rousers here.
It's true, it's true.
So if you want help people to promote your message, this is a great place to start.
It turns out, absolutely.
So we had a fun time this morning on our panel about taxes, and I really enjoyed the way you presented it, kind of like a tour across America, if you will, where you talked about the different tax challenges. And so how do we use that storytelling method to engage more people to where they understand you need to start taking some action, and sooner rather than later? Because we always complain about the federal level, but all taxes, all politics, all issues that affect our day-to-day are local.
It's true.
We're governed by our HOA more than the federal government. I mean, just, yeah.
It's true. Yes.
Have some oil stains in your carport, boy, you're in trouble.
Absolutely. So one of the ways that I think about tax policy is that it affects everybody, regardless of where you are in the country, regardless of how much you earn. You're going to interact with either federal tax code or state tax code, or you're going to buy something in a shop and pay sales tax on it.
Right.
And it really hits people in their wallets and in their real lives. So if you're an entrepreneur and you want to have a successful business, one of the things you want to avoid is getting a letter from a state revenue authority or the IRS, and you might have to shell out some cash to avoid complicated tax problems down the road. Or an individual, you just want to be able to be successful and earn more money and keep more of your earnings. And a lot of times the complications of the tax code get in the way. And right now, like I was saying, at the state level, we have a really interesting divide and debate where some states are really moving towards a tax code that's more attractive for workers, simpler, lower. I talked about the road trip earlier today. You could go on a road trip from New England through the Southeast and the Southwest, the Mountain West, and you're going to see states that have been cutting and simplifying taxes. But if you get over to the West Coast, they're going a little bit different direction these days.
Just a little bit, don't you think?
Yes.
So what is something that someone can do today to start becoming a part of tax change?
So the first thing, it's always important to be informed. Tax policy is really complicated, but you need to be aware of what's going on in your debate, in the state where you live. Tax Foundation does a lot of work. We have a wonderful blog that provides updates on these various debates, especially around election season. A lot of states have ballot measures where you can go and vote specifically on whether a tax increase or state constitutional change will allow for more taxes. There was a ballot measure in the state of Illinois that was going to allow for a progressive rate structure that the voters in Illinois voted down recently. And I think it's important to be aware that no, it's not just the members of the state legislature. It's you personally a lot of times in various states where you can vote directly on tax policy. And in some states, it's not the tax policy, it's the spending policy. Are you going to approve of massive borrowing for new projects that maybe you don't necessarily agree with or you're not sure about, but it will lead to higher taxes in the future. So be informed. And then once you're informed, take the action that you need, whether it's calling your state legislator or your congressman or participating in the democratic process when there's a ballot measure available in your election cycle.
And a lot of states, can get those directly on now.
Yes.
And so you don't have to rely on your representative.
Right.
You can actually take action.
Mm-hmm. There's different signatures and petitions and things that can happen. It depends on the state, but it's certainly more direct democracy in tax than maybe people are familiar with.
So what can people find when they go to your website?
So our website, taxfoundation.org, provides a lot of different informational things. I think the most attractive thing is we do a weekly maps program where every other week you're going to get a map of the United States and different tax policy measures in the United States, and then the other week you're going to get a map of Europe. And we do these comparative maps because it helps people see where their state is on a certain policy measure. You might look at a state income tax map and say, oh, I'm in Tennessee. I don't have to pay income taxes, but all these other states, they have to. Right. Or we did a map on beer taxes in Europe last week. So you may know, if you're planning a trip to Europe, where you're gonna have to pay the highest beer taxes, and it's not Germany.
Really?
Right.
Oh,
yes.
So we'll have to go to the website to find out?
Absolutely.
All right, so give us that website again one more time.
Taxfoundation.org.
Well, thank you so much for being a part of this show and for participating on my panel. It was so great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great to be here.
Absolutely. So, Daniel, thank you for joining us, and I'm Heather Wagenhals. We'll be back with more Freedom Fest TV right after this. Welcome back to Freedom Fest TV, part of the Ultimate Summit for Liberty. I'm your host, Heather Wagenhals, and joining me is a fellow media professional, Joe Thomas.
Thank you, Heather, for having me here. Heather was on my radio show and my YouTube show as well, so I appreciate you coming to help sell the word of Freedom Fest. I've run into many folks from Central Virginia who are here, so hopefully that helps.
Oh, excellent. Well, good to hear that. So what makes Freedom Fest so special?
I think it's because it's not dragged one way or the other. I mean, it very, very brutally keeps everyone in the room. And I think that's difficult because you see events like CPAC, they start to get dragged into the Republican Party. Then you go to other events and they start to drag towards the Democratic Party, and you say, well, where's just regular folks? And I really feel like that's an itching place where people are just tired. I mean, look at the moms movement. This was nonpartisan. These were moms who were Democrats or Republicans, but they were saying, hold it, you're going to take my kids away from me. You say I shouldn't have any say in my kids. So there's so many issues that we agree on that I think the binary Republican-Democrat thing has started to wear thin on people.
For sure, and even more so, they're connected labels, of liberal and conservative,
Right.
and everybody just keeps letting it spiral.
Well, sure, because it's a race to the bottom. It's about, denigrate the other person enough so nobody votes for them, and then hope you have enough people left at the end to vote for you.
So, as a fellow broadcaster and someone that's been in the media for significant time, where do you think we're going? Because on one hand, we have more outlets than ever, but then we still have the talking heads and the disinformation.
Well, and that's going to always be a case, but I think what has made the last 10 years, and I've been coming to FreedomFest for probably 10 years
This
now.
is my 10th.
And I remember when Mark had no idea, what to do with a radio show. He'd go, I don't know, go sit next to the bookstore. And I've watched it bloom with you and folks like John Stossel coming and doing the TV, Glenn Beck, that kind of thing. So I think there's a place, terrestrial radio is going to always be important because it's portable and it's where you are, it's where you're present. But all these web outlets, and the successful ones you can tell, like Del Bigtree and the Highwire, they think about the viewer. They're there to serve the viewer. Sometimes we fail in our media to think about the viewer. We're like, I've got a thing I've got to say, and I've got a website, and I'm going to say it. But does the viewer or the listener need to hear it? So that's the real rub, because in terrestrial radio, that's always what we've had to think of, because you can push that button all day and just keep dial riding around.
Right. And we want them to stop, and we want them to engage. And I think that I'm going to go out on a limb here. We have this authenticity problem. And I'm not talking about it in the sense of like people aren't genuine, but people are saying, I'm my authentic self. I'm going to just be me. And there's a difference between being authentic and being appropriate.
Sure.
And I'm finding this being a challenge, because it's not about, I don't want to stifle somebody's ability to say something,
Mm-hmm.
but articulate your position clearly and respectfully.
Yes, and that's the secret. See, people forget that the secret to communication is being listened to. And so if you come into the room throwing Molotov cocktails around verbally, and half the room goes, I don't want to have anything to do with that, well, now you've lost half the people that you could maybe win over with something really important you're going to say.
Right.
And maybe because I've been in radio 37 years, I remember when there was 7 words you couldn't say on the radio and all that. So you think of other ways, and it's important. I always thought, not being able to swear. I grew up in New York City. I mean, you learn to swear before you learn to walk.
Right.
But the forcing you to come up with creative new ways to engage it. I mean, people ask me this all the time, especially sponsors of the radio show. They say, well, who's your target audience? And I look at them and I said, everyone. And they say, no, really, Joe, who's your target
what's your
audience?
demographic?
I said, no, I really go into the studio, whether it's for the afternoon constitutional or for the radio show, and I want everyone to tune in. Mm-hmm. And I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I want to ask you what's going on. I have my thoughts on what's going on. That's not a question, but
right.
I want to hear what you've got in your mind. I want to know about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. We were talking about sex workers today.
Right.
And what is the appropriate role of that? And what is a Christian libertarian versus the atheist libertarian, and that's the kind of thing that FreedomFest gives a talk radio show all this amazing opportunity to bring up.
The diversity.
Right.
And what do you know it? We're all in here,
Mm-hmm.
and we're all civil to each other.
So earlier in the week, I think our first day here, there was a story out of Arlington, Virginia about a sculpture of Lady Liberty laying on her side like this, just like she's about to have a nap, or in a cheesecake picture. And the initial reaction of our listeners was, that's a
That's
blaspheming.
sacrilege, yeah.
But then the artist said they were putting it specifically near the Department of Defense and the intelligence community. And I said, stop a second and think about, the Third Amendment violations we're having, the Fourth Amendment violations we're having with the surveillance state. Maybe Liberty is taking a nap. And maybe we told her.
She's tired of all the nonsense.
Right. Maybe we told her, we don't need you right now. Go lay down.
Yeah.
And maybe this is a reminder to us that Liberty needs to be standing there and fighting for us, all of us. And so that's the kind of fun stuff that Freedom Fest gives us an opportunity to talk about.
Well, it's been great having a conversation with you and catching up. If folks want to find you and your shows, where do they go?
They can go to WCHV.com. That's where, and we also have a free smartphone app.
Okay.
So if you go to either iTunes or Google Play and search Seville 1075, it's easier that way, because if you type WCHV, it takes a while to find it.
Okay.
But if you type Seville 1075, it pops right up. You download it. You can listen to us anywhere. I've got listeners in Oklahoma and Alabama and all over the country who tune in on the smartphone app and listen easily. So it's a great way to do it.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for being a part of the
thank
show.
you for
Joe
having us.
Thomas on Freedom Fest TV. I'm Heather Wagenhals, and we'll be back in a minute.